owner of Potential Release Consulting Services, and, as I said, a former board chair. She has over 25 years of business and human resources experience. She's worked with numerous organizations in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Through leadership programs and strategic planning that she offers as an executive coach, Diane assists organizations in creating compelling strategies to meet the complex and challenging business demands and the needs of individual professionals. Diane is recognized as a leader in the area of business and team leadership, organizational development, and embracing change. Her message is that individuals, groups, and organizations that acknowledge and celebrate their connections to personal interests and their personal passions are effective in their work and in their professional lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce Diane Duncan.
Films focusing on fighters, starting with Errol Flynn in 1942, have been produced and audiences flock to theaters to see them. These movies include such stars as Humphrey Bogart and Paul Newman. The one film that comes to mind for most of us is the 1976 film Rocky, which was the story of the underdog fighting their way to the top. We, like the fighters in all these films, are fighting our way to the top. We are in the ring every single day fighting hunger. We are in the fight against hunger. We are in the fight against poverty. We're fighting against programs that might be cut. We're fighting against floods, fires, and other natural disasters. We're fighting. We're in a fight that some days we may feel we are losing. We are the Rockies of the world trying to win. We're fighting against people out of work here in the state. We're fighting against less salvaged food. We're fighting. In the film Rocky, there is a scene where one of the characters, Adrian, Rocky's companion, asks Rocky why he fights. And he looks at Adrian and simply says, "Because I can't sing or dance." Now, we may not be able to sing or dance either, but we can fight the good fight. And we can make efforts to win. If we're going to fight this fight, we must find ways to sustain our passion in the good times and the bad times, which isn't always easy. But we must sustain this passion in our agencies, with our donors, and in our communities. 1 in 4. 1 in 4. Write that down. 1 in 4. Let me share the statistics about looking at hunger today. Nearly 49 million Americans, 14% of the population, are facing hunger. The number of food insecure in our nation has been increasing steadily in recent years, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about this from Patrick on a national basis. According to Feeding America, there's been a 46% increase in need over the past 4 years. 15.4% of Maine households, or approximately 200,000 people, are at risk of hunger. Maine ranks 13th in the nation and first in New England in terms of food insecurity, the lack of access to enough food to live a healthy life. 24.6% of Maine children, or 1 in every 4 kids, 1 in 4, are food insecure. 43% of Maine's food insecure population makes too much to qualify for food stamps and rely on Food Assistance Network. You here in this room today. You matter. We have to do this together. But let me begin by sharing the story of one woman who sustained her passion throughout her lifetime. And many of you in this room were privileged to know her, as I was. And that's the story of Joanne. Joanne grew up and lived in the Midwest, and then she decided in the early 80s to come to Maine. And when she arrived, she looked around and she saw that there was a real need, a need for helping her neighbors. She found that people around her were hungry. And Joanne wanted to do something about it. So Joanne started growing a garden in her backyard. And she invited others to start gardens in their backyards. And she invited people into her house. And she started distributing out of her kitchen. But before long, as many of you know, her kitchen was too small. And then she found other places. But during the process, she also heard the story that a local grocer was throwing out food. And she decided to have a conversation with that local grocer to find out how she could get some of that salvaged food. And that began a very long relationship with Hannaford Brothers, or who is now known as Salvation America. Joanne was a fighter. She was passionate about what she did every day. She wouldn't accept no for an answer. When one warehouse was bursting at the seams, she turned to find other space. And if she met you, it wasn't enough to meet you. Joanne would look at you and say, so what are you going to do for us? How can you help us? She would never accept no. She would draw in as many people as she could to be in this fight. Because she wanted to end hunger in Maine. She was always fighting. Now, if I think about my first visit to the food bank, it was back in the mid-90s. And I was asked to attend a dinner where a local company was given the Robert E. Dunton Award for outstanding service to agencies in the food bank. And that evening, I really can't tell you the company that was given the award. What I can tell you about that evening was a woman who spoke briefly and shared her story. At the time, she was living out of her car with her children. She had no place to live, and she had no food. And she came to the food bank, and she said, what can I do? How can I help? I need food for my children. And at the time, she began working to help out. And with that assistance, she was able to feed her children. But that night, what struck me about her was that she shared her gift of singing to the people in the room. Her name was Carolyn, and she had an absolutely beautiful voice. And with that voice, she shared the gift. For me listening, it was as if she was singing for all the people that were hungry. Those weren't necessarily the words, but that was her gift that she could give. She had no other gift. She was living out of her car. She was trying to feed her children. That gave me the passion inside to say, I need to help. I need to help the people like Carolyn. And if you think about Carolyn in the picture that's painted, how much has it changed? How many Carolyns do you know? How many people are still coming to your door and saying, I need help? We need to keep the passion inside. So what's my story? Why am I here? Yes, I was introduced very nicely by Cheryl, gave you all my credentials and all the background, and that I was former board chair for Good Shepherd Food Bank, which I was board chair for 8 years, and involved long before that. But why am I speaking to you about sustaining passion? I just shared with you my story of visiting the food bank and Carolyn, but there's more to my story. I worked in a corporate setting for 20 years, and during my early 90s, I met a man who I fell in love with and married. And mid-90s, I decided to leave the corporate setting and start my own business. We had 2 children in high school. I was starting a business. It was going well. Life was good. My husband was semi-retired, and we began thinking about the future and where we might live, even thinking about getting away from Maine winters, as many people do, and where we might spend time. Suddenly, my life was turned upside down. My husband was diagnosed with cancer. This was in March of 2002. For the next 8 months, I cared for him, and I was able to take some time and be with him. I prayed that he would beat the cancer, but he didn't. And in November of 2002, Bob died. He was the man that the Robert E. Dutton Award was given to companies. He was a friend of Joanne, and he was a friend to fighting the hunger in Maine. And during his last days, he was in a coma at home. Joanne came and said goodbye to Bob. And I know Bob would need to know that Joanne was taking care of things. And then he passed away. The next year, I found myself immersed in grief over Bob, restarting my business, and helping a sister who was in her final stages of breast cancer. When Bob was fighting his fight, my sister's cancer came back with a vengeance. After Bob died, and while I was helping to get my sister with her cancer, I distanced myself from the food bank. I said to myself, that was Bob and Joanne's thing. That wasn't mine. That was their passion. But guess what? It was my passion. It was part of me. It was Carolyn's singing that I was hearing again. And I knew I needed to return to the food bank.